So we've created an animation with the camera, and now we're going to work on creating an animation with the actual object. So we're going to also create an object in a new way. So we're going to come to Create Sketch, and I'm working on the back window, and I'm going to just draw the outline of an object I want to create, as if it's a two-dimensional object, just the silhouette of one side of it. So I'm working along the x-axis, and I'm going to draw what will become like a vase or a candlestick holder. You can do a pawn, like a chess pawn, whatever you want. So I'm going to give it a little dimension and draw right up to the x-axis. So that was just Create Sketch. And now I'm going to go up to Multiply and Lathe. It's right here, Extend Lathe. And the reason, you'll see why we had it set up on the y-axis here. I'm sorry if I said x-axis before, but we have it set up on the y-axis. And I'm going to click from the top right along the y-axis and draw. And you can see how this can get kind of crazy, and you don't want to flip it outside of itself. You want to draw straight down the y-axis. So if you want to check it out, looks like that. If you had other objects already in here, it would lathe all of the objects. So you could polygon select just the one you want, or you can put it into a new layer so it's just affecting the object that you want. So you can hit spacebar or click Lathe again to keep that. And now we're going to name it and give it a color. So I'm in the polygon selection. I'm just clicking on any polygon, right bracket, Q on the keyboard, the letter Q, and I'm going to name it Face New. I'm going to make it a color. Press OK, make sure smoothing is checked, and press OK. So now we have it as a color. I'm also going to subdivide it while I have it selected. So that's just hitting the Tab key, and you can see it changed a little bit. So that's an important step. Make sure you subdivide by pressing Tab while the object is selected. And now we're going to make a room for it just while we're setting stuff up. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to come to another layer up here on top. I'm clicking on another layer, and then I'm clicking the bottom triangle just so I can see my object. And I'm just creating a room by coming to the Create Box tool. We're going to make 3 boxes. We're going to do the floor and give it a little dimension here. And you can get it in the center. And then I'm clicking out of the box tool, polygon selecting it, right bracket, Q, room new, and you can give it any color you want. Press OK, OK, and now I'm just going to come into the box primitive and make the 2 walls. So I can move around, make sure that looks good, and then hit the space bar, hit box again, and I'm not making mine perfect, but you can spend time on yours to get it looking good. But I think for our purposes now, that is fine. Okay, space bar to set that up, make sure everything looks great. So now we're going to move on to animating the actual object. So I'm going to come back into the object layer just by clicking on it up here. I'm going to hit A on my keyboard so we can see it really well. It recenters. So what we're doing is we're adding morph targets, and you can only do this to a subdivided model. So make sure you've hit that Tab key. And we're basically just setting up positions. So down here on the bottom, you can see all these letters, and we're going to work on the M. So you click on the M, and you can see there's base, and we're going to add new. So I'm going to call it bow. We're going to make it bow the object like it's bowing towards us. And you hit create. When you press create, you'll see this yellow bar pop up, and that means a new endomorph has been created. So you can see, make sure you're always working on the morph that you want to be working on from this drop down. So make sure you're on bow while we're creating the bow. You can't add or subtract geometry from a morph target. It needs to be the same amount of polygons as the base, and this is what the base looks like now. So just make sure you understand that. And what we're doing is we're creating maps, basically. So each of these from the drop down is a map. So we're on the bow map. And maps are basically things that get stored inside the model. This is going to be a vertex map. The vertex are corners and points. And a vertex map is saving where all the corners and the points are in relation to the base model. So the computer is doing all this work for us, and it's kind of nice to understand, but just know that the computer is saving within the model, within the object, where all the points and corners are as you're moving it around. So you just have to be on the correct map so we can have everything organized and know what's going on. So we're going to use the bend tool. So we come up to modify and bend. It's kind of right here under rotate. And you can click from the top and just drag it forward. Now you don't want to go too far because that's going to break some polygons and bend it into itself. And you can see how it can play around. So get it looking the way you want. You can also press the N key and you can adjust the angle here. You can play around with this. You also have this orange triangle that is telling you the axis it's bending from, and you can right click on this and move it around, but just be careful with that because it can get distorted. So there's lots of options here, but you can adjust them or not. So now we're going to bend just a portion of it and we're going to make a new map. So let's go back to the base, start at the base. I'm going to get out of the bend tool and I'm going to go to new. Sorry, I'll do that again. So I'm clicking on here, holding new, and I'm going to call it bow 2, create. And now I'm just going to, with my right click, I'm just going to draw a selection. If I wanted to add more to it, I can shift and draw more on. And now I can come back to modify bend. Oops. Let me do it from the top. And you can bend just the top. So you can really get very creative and specific with this. Okay, I'm going to come back to my base. I'm going to deselect spacebar question mark. And now we're going to try something called the spline guide. So I'm going to come to new and I'm going to call it spline guide, create. Make sure it shows up. Make sure you're in the spline guide here. And I'm in modify. And spline guide is all the way at the bottom. So click on it. You don't really see anything happen, but until you press N for numeric. So I want to make it look like the object is kind of like blowing in the wind, like it's a cartoon object blowing. So I'm going to affect the x-axis for that. And then I can come in here and I can see the center line. I can drag the circle of the center line all the way to the end. Well, first I'll show you what it does when it's in the center. It's going to affect both. So that might be something you want. And then if I drag it all the way to the end, it's just going to move it one way. So you can make it look like it's being blown by a strong wind. You can make it look super cartoonish. It's kind of fun. So really play around with that. You can get really creative here. When you have it the way you want it, you can click out of here. Always come back to the base and you can get out of the spline guide. And there's two more I want to try, which are twist and lattice. So let's make a new, call it twist, create. You can just hit enter to create and come down to twist and you can just kind of, whoa, see what happens with that. You can go kind of crazy. Again, just be sure you're not like breaking the forms and turning them in on each other. So play around with that. See how it looks from each angle. So that's twist. We're going to come back to the base and we're going to make a new one and we're going to call it lattice. Create. So lattice tool, next out of here, is, so make sure again you're in lattice here in your morph map and lattice tool is here, and this gives you these dots you can kind of pull. So it's a little like the spline guide, but not totally. You have a little different options here. So just play around with that. See what you like, what you don't like, and you can really change it a lot. So we're going to save. Let me get it in the right place. I like to name my model just so I have it set up. So we're going to save and then we're going to send it to layout. Okay, first thing you want to get in the habit of doing is come to Camera, Properties, HD 1920 1080. And then we can come into the camera view, current camera, and we can just get it close up. So you're going to have a couple different objects in here. And I'm hitting Y to rotate, hitting T to move, zooming in, and you might make your room bigger so you can see it. And then I'm just going to move this light out of the way for now. Okay, so we're going to come to Objects, Properties, and you can see we have subdivisions here. You can uncheck bones. You don't need that. So if you double click on subdivision, we're just kind of setting it up for the rendering here. The display subpatch level, the highest you want to go for this is 6. So the higher the number, like the longer it's going to take to render, but it's also going to look smoother and nicer. So it's kind of a balance with what your computer can handle and what will look good. And then the render subpatch here, you want this to say per object level. That should be the default. And 18, you can get pretty high on this one without making the render time too much longer. So just get that set up. And then we're going to come to add modifier and morph mixer. So that was here, add modifier, there's a lot, morph mixer. If you did 2 by accident, you can right click and remove. And it should have the number of morphs. Okay, mine was messed up, and that might happen to you because I was on layer 2, which is my room, and I didn't have any morphs on there. See how it said 0 endomorphs? So just make sure you're on the current item, layer 1, you're on your object properties. I'm going to uncheck bones. I'm going to change the subdivision here. This one was 6, next one's 18. And then I'm going to add modifier morph mixer. There we go. My 5 endomorphs are there. It's good when things get messed up during the demo because that will probably happen to other people too. So what we want to do right away is drag this on top of the subdivision because we want that to happen first. And then we can double click on this. So I just double clicked on morph mixer in that list and this options come up. So these keys are, it's like a key and a plus. That's how you make keyframes, and that's how we're going to animate. Come to the time, we're going to make it 7 seconds again, so that's 2:10. And then we're going to move this gray time indicator. Just going to move it to 20. And I want to do the first bow. So I'm going to add a key, and I'm just going to drag it to 100. Now, all of the other ones need keyframes set at 0, so you're just going to click them at 0. Then I'm going to drag my time indicator again to 40. I'm going to make the bow 0, so the key is set at 0. And then I want to make my lattice, no, I want my spline guide. I like that one. Make my spline guide 100. And then just set all the other keys at 0. So you can do this for each. You keep on moving the time indicator, then you pick another one, move this back to 0, and maybe have twist. And you can see when I slid the slider, it automatically made a keyframe, and then just click the other one, so it's 0. Now we don't see keyframes in the timeline like we did with the animation of the camera, and that's because the keyframes are in the morph envelope, which is this little E button. So you can click on one and you get this graph editor, and you can see all the keyframes here. All these little dots are keyframes. You can come down to the bottom. Let's see, we can make this bigger. And you can see the morph group, and you can see, you can double click. Bow has one, we did spline guide, and we did twist. So you can double click to adjust them, and then you can just select on here and you can move them around. You can move the keyframes around. We can also delete keyframes. So you can select and hold shift and select another one, and you can go to keys, delete selected keys. You can also lock them if you want to lock them. But on the PC, I think you can just hit delete on the keyboard. And if you locked it by accident, just right click and click it again. So click, hold shift, and if you're on the PC, you can delete. If you're up here, you can go. If you're in a Mac, you can just do delete selected keys. So you can add keyframes, you can remove them, you can go to your different morphs. The ones that don't have it will have nothing. And then you can add more keyframes here. So you can play around with the timeline, you can play around with this graph, you can edit and add stuff as you wish. Oh, if you want to delete all keyframes, you just hold shift and click on the E, and then it deletes all the keyframes for that option, for that morph. And then you can make new ones and see. Let's put that back. So when you can test it by scrolling on the timeline. So I can scroll this, see how it looks, and you're going to get fancier with yours. You're going to add at least 3 lathed objects in a room. You're going to add image and texture to the surfaces, and you're going to morph them all. So really play around with this, and then you're going to render it same as we did the toy train. You're going to render it as the sequence of PNG images and put it into Premiere Pro, and then add some music and fade it in and have fun with that. So really play around with this. There's a lot you can do. I want you to get super creative and have fun.